independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
Hello and welcome. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's start with a check of the top headlines this hour. The US military shot down an Iranian drone after it aggressively approached the USS Abraham Lincoln in the Arabian Sea. Washington says talks with Iran remain scheduled this week despite the incident. Former US President Bill Clinton and his wife Hillary Clinton agreed to testify in the congressional investigation into Jeffrey Epstein, allowing them to avoid being found in contempt of Congress. Former UK Cabinet Minister Peter Mandelson has quit the House of Lords after leaked emails tied him to Jeffrey Epstein, while British police have opened a criminal probe into alleged misconduct in public office. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio met India's Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar. Both leaders backed the new India-US trade deal and discussed cooperation on critical minerals and energy security. US President Donald Trump and Colombian President Gustavo Petro met at the White House. Both leaders pledged to strengthen cooperation in the region. President Trump signed a roughly $1.2 trillion funding bill, ending a short federal shutdown after a 217-214 House vote. It funds most agencies but only keeps Homeland Security open until February 13 amid immigration tension. Trump urges Russian President Vladimir Putin to end the war in Ukraine, saying Moscow kept its one-week pause but resumed attacks on Kyiv. French authorities raided Elon Musk's X office over alleged political interference and deepfakes. Musk calls the raid a political attack. Alright, on to now the top of focus. The US military has stated that it shot down an Iranian drone that aggressively approached USS Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier in the Arabian Sea on hours before two gunboats operated by Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps approached a US-flagged tanker in the Strait of Hormuz and threatened to board and seize the ship. Meanwhile, the White House has stated that the United States is still planning talks with Iranian officials this week, even after the drone incident. Donald Trump has also stated that the United States is negotiating with Iran. Let's listen into his comments.
They are negotiating. They'd like to do something, and we'll see if something is going to be done. They had a chance to do something a while ago, and it didn't work out, and we did Midnight Hammer. I don't think they want that happening again, but they would like to negotiate. We are negotiating with them right now.
Meanwhile, the United States has agreed to Iran's request for moving the location of the nuclear talks from Istanbul to Oman. According to media reports, negotiations are still ongoing about whether Arab and Muslim countries from the region will join the talks in Oman. Iran had earlier indicated that it wanted talks with the United States in a bilateral format without the presence of regional partners. Joining me now in this conversation is American journalist and author from Washington, D.C., Matthew Wadham. Matthew, thanks very much for joining us this morning. How ready is the United States really to attack further if there is more aggression from the Iranian side?
I think the United States is fully prepared to attack Iran if that's what President Trump decides to do. The wild card here is what Iran would do in retaliation. Would it strike out at U.S. bases in the Middle East? Would it attack Israel? As you know, since Israel is a major is the United States' most powerful ally in the region. But yeah, I think when the United States is ready to go, the Armada is, if it's not there already, it's pretty close to being there in Iranian waters. And I don't think the Trump administration would have any problem moving forward. The question is, do they want to do that, or do they just want to apply pressure to the regime in Tehran to get it to clean up its act and stop, mass murdering citizens who object to the totalitarian theocratic government there?
Matthew, how do you see this escalation taking place just immediately after Iran had signaled that it is ready for nuclear negotiations after Trump had been calling for them?
Well, it shows that Iran is concerned that it could get wiped out by the United States, and possibly, Israel would join in such an attack. So they are justifiably concerned for their own survival at this point. So it makes sense for Iran to talk to the United States. Now, whether negotiations between the two countries will amount to much is another question. Remember, as I've said many times before, Iran, they have regular political rallies where they denounce the United States as the great Satan. So I don't think there's a lot of wiggle room there. I don't think that there's much for the two sides to talk about. But, if diplomats can find a way to avert a military conflict, then they are going to try to do that.
All right, Matthew, thanks for your comments. Stay on with us as we move on now, viewers. Let's cover news on the Jeffrey Epstein files. Former President Bill Clinton and his 5 former top U.S. diplomat Hillary Clinton will now testify before Congress in late February about sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Former President Bill Clinton and his wife, former top U.S. diplomat, they will be talking about their alleged role. Republican lawmaker James Comer has said that the bill that Clintons will now appear on February 27, while Hillary Clinton will testify the day before. The Clintons had been ordered to provide closed-door viewers. The Clintons had been ordered to provide closed-door depositions to the White House Oversight Committee, which is investigating Epstein's links to powerful figures. The couple had challenged the subpoenas earlier, arguing they lacked a clear legislative purpose. Meanwhile, London's Metropolitan Police have launched a criminal investigation into allegations that former UK Business Secretary Peter Mandelson leaked Downing Street emails and market-sensitive information to Jeffrey Epstein. Scotland Yard has confirmed Mandelson is under investigation for misconduct in public office, a crime that carries a life sentence. Detectives plan to interview Mandelson and collect evidence from senior government officials. In response, Mandelson has denied receiving $75,000 from Epstein, which recently disclosed bank statements appear to support. The former business secretary has resigned from the House of Lords after the scandal broke. Moreover, U.S. President Donald Trump has called on Americans to move on from the Jeffrey Epstein scandal. Trump has claimed that he was cleared in the latest document release, saying nothing linked him to Epstein other than false claims. Let's listen into that statement.
I think it's really time for the country to get onto something else. Now that nothing came out about me, other than it was a conspiracy against me, literally, by Epstein and other people. But I think it's time now for the country to maybe get onto something else.
But what would you say to people who feel like they haven't gotten justice, Mr. President?
Something that people care about.
Matthew Wade continues to stay with us. Matthew, I request to join us back. Firstly, what kind of reactions are really now coming in to the latest release of the Epstein files? Clintons have finally agreed to testify. How do you see this? Is a damage control mode they are now getting into? And what more information about Trump's role there has come out as far as names from the United States, the elites who had joined Epstein's parties are concerned? Let's talk about them first.
Okay, well, if this is damage control by the Clintons, I think it's like a preemptive strike, preemptive damage control, because it's not clear that Bill or Hillary Clinton did anything wrong with respect to the deceased sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, but they were evidence. There's a mountain of evidence that they were very close to him, and that's why Congress wanted to call them in for questioning. And they initially resisted, and now they've agreed to be questioned. And the House of Representatives suspended its vote on holding them in contempt, to see if they actually do testify. Now, there's all sorts of people who are concerned about the Epstein files. The government, the Department of Justice, under the Epstein Files Transparency Act, last Friday dumped something like 3 million documents, including various photographs and videos, on its Epstein File Act disclosure site. And people are still, that's a lot of documents, so people are still going through them. A lot of the stuff that's in there are scurrilous allegations, like just talk between people, leveling accusations that are not backed up by any actual evidence at all. So, I think it's going to take investigators a while to figure out, what, if anything, should be done with that evidence. And, but there are some people who are nervous that they're going to be that charges will be brought, but so far very little has happened, and a lot of supporters of the president are not happy that no charges have been brought. They think that Attorney General Pam Bondi should be charging lots of people with improprieties related to Jeffrey Epstein, but it hasn't happened yet, and they're growing impatient. Now, this doesn't mean she should actually charge people with anything, unless they're guilty unless they seem to be guilty of a crime. But people are growing. Members of the public and of the Republican Party base are growing impatient, and they want to see something done.
Let's also now talk about the big names that are coming out from the United Kingdom and from Europe in these files. There's of course the mention of Andrew Mountbatten. Then further details have also come out about the Norwegian princess and her son. What do we know? How are foreign nationals whose names are being propped up going to be investigated?
Well, if it looks like they've committed a crime, then they will probably get investigated by the U.S. Department of Justice. But a lot of them, I think the accusations against them fall short of criminal activity. Like, for example, the Duchess of York, or maybe she's the former Duchess of York, since Prince Andrew's titles were taken away from him. Sarah Ferguson, has some gushing emails in there when she's like getting very friendly or flirtatious seemingly with Jeffrey Epstein, saying, you've done so much for me, you should just marry me. So, there's things like that are embarrassing, I guess, in retrospect, now that the world knows what Jeffrey Epstein, what a criminal cretin he was and a sex offender. But these things are just embarrassing. They're not necessarily going to lead to any criminal liability. But there's a lot of embarrassing stuff in there in those 3 million pages that were just released. And as journalists and watchdog groups pour through this material, no doubt some interesting allegations will emerge. Whether those will be criminally actionable is a different question entirely.
All right, Matthew, thanks for joining us with your comments here for now. We'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you.
And we move on, viewers. Now, India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar and US Secretary of State Marco Rubio have met in Washington ahead of the inaugural Critical Minerals Ministerial meeting convened by the US scheduled for today. Both sides discussed expanding bilateral and multilateral cooperation, including closer coordination through the Quad grouping with Australia, Japan, and the US. Trade and economic ties were a key focus of the talks, with leaders welcoming the recent trade agreement between Donald Trump and Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The talks also covered energy security, nuclear cooperation, defense partnership, and new technology. Critical minerals emerged as a major priority, with plans to formalize joint exploration, mining, and processing efforts. Both countries say early meetings will be held to fast track these initiatives and deepen strategic and economic engagement across the Indo-Pacific. All right, viewers, those are the latest details that are coming up as far as the India-US trade deal is concerned. S. Jaishankar and Marco Rubio have met in Washington, and of course discussions revolved around the critical minerals and other resources. Joining me now in this discussion is Shruti Das Gupta, who's an international affairs analyst from New Delhi. Shruti, thanks very much. What we're seeing is a rather unprecedented such bond being seen once again after a brief derailment from that stance between the US and India. Once again, tariffs have been brought down. Prime Minister Modi has been lauded once again by US President Donald Trump, and the outcomes are clear. Tariffs have been brought down to 18%. But what do you think are going to remain some of the critical challenges at this point in time?
First of all, although it might seem like there was a freeze, diplomatic freeze never existed. There were always talks happening. They failed, or there were, areas where they could not find meeting ground. So there were repeated talks happening. It was an eventual thaw that was going to happen. We faced tariffs in two sections. That first came in August 2025, and then the next one came in November 2025. So we have had this tug of war with the new Trump 2.0 regime, because they've had to take a very harder stance with their declining fiscal elements in their own system. So because of that, they've taken a very unusual route to ensure their economic survival. And the consequence of that is a weaponization of tariffs, which the rest of the world has faced, and it was never a permanent solution. So they were always going to look for the deal, and it was a blink first moment. The EU deal helped India present itself with a lot of opportunities, and hence the off-ramp that we are now looking at is happening. The meeting between Jaishankar and Rubio that we are looking at is happening on the sides of the Critical Mineral Ministerial. Now, this is a Quad effect. The Quad is part of the Critical Mineral Ministerial, and I think there is another version of this which was initially launched in 2022, because they realized that critical minerals are critical for the future of technology. And China seems to have it in its grasp very firmly. The first instant of China weaponizing their critical mineral source came in 2010, where it froze its exports to Japan. And since then, the world has been looking at how it has been growing, but not doing much towards it. So the 2022 ministerial, where all the 4 Quad members are part of now, and this particular ministerial that is happening now, its first one was in, I think, July 2025, if I'm not wrong. And the Quad decided that they need to become self-sufficient, as well as a major part of the world's critical mineral, rare earth elements, rare earth magnet processing system. And they've been working towards it. India has separate agreements for the same. Kabul is working with Australia. They have made Australia is a major source, second largest source of critical minerals and resources, but it wants to go from being an ore provider to a processor, where Kabul is working with them. There is, if I'm not wrong, billions worth being put in by the Australian government themselves to ensure that this particular initiative succeeds. India is doing their own bit. They are in collaboration with Japan in Andhra Pradesh, trying to process the rare earth elements and rare earth magnets into a survivable source for India as well as provider for the rest of the world. So there is going to be a balance. The Quad, though a security arrangement for the Pacific as well as the South China Sea, is now looking to diversify, or has been looking to diversify itself from just a security arrangement and towards a more balancing act in the world geopolitics, specifically related to critical minerals and rare earth elements. So this particular ministerial, the Quad being there, the bilateral happening between Jaishankar and Rubio, they are all part of this effort where USA, Japan, India and Australia try and find ways to ensure that the future does not have a single player dominating the field, as we have seen in this particular element, and China's attitude towards the rest of the world in controlling the supply source as well as how those particular elements are used, and its reluctance to share the technology.
How much do you think this deal is then going to help both nations, not just India but also the US, counter China going ahead?
Well, from what I've seen, the deals that India has been making around the world, not just this particular one, but with the EU, with Australia, with Netherlands, with the African nations, the Mercosur, the MENA markets, everything that we've been doing is trying to diversify markets for ourselves, as well as try and diversify our supply chain, so that there is we are not dependent on one particular source. So once we've set out our roadmaps and set up our supply chains, we can help other members where we are part of collaborations to have access to the very same resources as such. So the particular deal that we're talking of between India and USA, although it hasn't been inked, the details of it is not so sure. There are elements that India is very chary about. One being dairy, because the feed of dairy is something that we are very, dairy milk as such are elements that have a sacred element to it for India. We use it in our worship, we use it in our prasad. So it does not, it's not just consumption based for us. So for dairy, the dairy sector is something which is looked at with a fine tooth comb. The agriculture sector is something that India is very, very careful with, because 40% of India's population depends on agriculture as a source of income. So we cannot afford to just blankly open the gates and invite anybody with agricultural produce to come and sell in India, because it will end up bankrupting or at least disrupting the scales inside the internal dynamics of India's economy on its own. So there are sectors where we are very careful, but we are very happy to collaborate with USA in terms of energy, in terms of technology, in terms of defense partnership. So there are places that we are very happy to do business with them, and those deals, of course, we are looking for the details of that. As far as the crudes and oil are done, that's a different conversation. I've had that on this channel as well as others, and found that there is a lot to be discussed. But these deals are, this off-ramp, this deal is allowing the diplomats to do their jobs without the overhang of a tension, whether when the reports go out, whether the masses will accept it, whether their personal and the public perceptions are matching or not. So there is de-escalation of sorts in terms of tension. But there was definitely never, as I said before, a freeze. Having this deal on the table helps USA to make a better partner of India. And when they do that, at least it will be more palatable for the MAGA base, and there will be no snooty movements coming out from either the Democrats or Republicans, because the way they have projected it is it's a big victory. For what we have seen, there is no black and white as yet, and we also still know that the crude relationships that have been quoted are not as simple or not as as being projected by Trump. So this is not something that is going to change for us, but it helps in the projection of things. It helps diplomats do their jobs better.
Yeah, Shruti, thanks for now. We'll discuss this further. But with that words, we're now going to move on. Now, an earthquake of magnitude 6 had struck Myanmar, as its strong tremors were also felt in Indian state of West Bengal and various parts of Bangladesh. According to reports, the earthquake struck 113 kilometers in the east of Akiab in Myanmar, shaking various parts of the West Bengal state, including parts like Kolkata and the neighboring country, Bangladesh. The quake was at a depth of 10 kilometers. This is the third felt earthquake in Myanmar just in last 71 hours. And now moving to news from Japan, Tetsuya Yamagami, the man who killed Japan's former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, has appealed for his life sentence. Yamagami was convicted for the fatal shooting of Abe in 2022. Yamagami pledged guilty to murder, but his sentence has divided opinion in Japan. Many view him as a cold-blooded murderer, while others point to his troubled upbringing and claims of religious abuse. The assassination of Abe was a political icon, and Japan's longest-serving prime minister had shocked the entire nation and the world, where gun crime is extremely rare. Abe's death prompted an investigation into the Unification Church, which was linked to politicians in Japan's ruling party. The church has faced criticism for its coercive practices and close ties to political figures. In 2025, a Tokyo court revoked the church's status as a religious corporation, pointing out its exploitative behavior towards followers. And now on to some technology news. French authorities have raided Elon Musk's X office in Paris as part of an investigation into alleged political interference and deepfakes. The probe, which began in January 2025, now also targets Musk's AI chatbot Grok over claims it produced illicit images of women and minors. Musk and former ex-CEO Linda Yaccarino have been summoned for voluntary interviews in April. The raid comes amid a broader European and UK crackdown, with authorities investigating whether Grok violated data protection laws and allowed harmful content to circulate. Musk called the raid a political attack on X. The investigation continues as a French prosecutors also summoned ex-employees as witnesses. And that's all we have time for, viewers. Thanks for watching NewsX World. For all international news and updates.